And I believe we are live. Hello, everyone. I know it's been a hot minute since there's been an Above the Line episode, but I'm back today. I'm very excited to be back. I'm so excited to talk about the stories that we have today. I feel like it's been a hot minute since I've been this excited about some of the stories coming out of the entertainment industry, which is the whole purpose of this show. And the reason why I started it is because of my love and excitement for talking about like speculation and all the things going on in the industry. I'm just very excited. So happy July to everyone and happy 4th of July. I have a video planned for next week that should be coming out. In fact, I probably need to pre-film it this evening. I know I've been a little bit absent recently. I've had some very big things, very exciting things happening in my life. And so it caused me to be a little bit away from YouTube for the time being. But we're back. I'm so excited. I'm also going to ask you guys whether you're watching this. Oh, why is this set to private? Hold on a minute. That's a problem. No, it says public. That's weird. Okay, it's switched to public. Okay, sorry. That spooked me for a second. I'd love your guys' feedback for going forward about what time these streams work, because today I really was ambitious with posting on Friday about 1 p.m. And then I was also really ambitious saying 3:30 when I knew I had things to do today. They were going to take me away from my house, and obviously like travel is a thing, traffic is a thing. So anyways, we're back here today, but for future, do these like evening, like mid-evening shows work better? Midday, is that more what we're vibing with? Just let me know. But let's get into our stories, and then we can kind of chat and catch up at the end of today's stream. I did not even get my chat ready, so hold on. I need to do that really quick. It's crazy how rusty you can feel doing something like this. Like, you don't think about it for so long that when you get back into it, it's like, oh, everything should just work, and it doesn't necessarily happen that way. So let's check. Reagan is here. Reagan, welcome to the stream. I'm so excited to see your name in the chat today. I hope you're doing well, my friend. I really appreciate it. It has been so long. It's been a hot minute. It's been a while. I don't even know. I think I posted a video a week ago, but it's been a while since there was an Above the Line. I also want to give a massive shout out at the beginning of today's episode to the great friend of the channel and of me personally, Nicholas Alexander Burke. You know him, you love him. He recorded an hour-long episode of Above the Line. It's a very special episode to me. We talked about all kinds of stuff, and for all of my followers, subscribers who are fans of DC and want to speculate, Nick has the immense knowledge that you need to discuss something like that, and listening to his speculation for the future of James Gunn's vision for DC, what their big event is going to be, what they're going to be building up to. He talked so much in that episode about it. He also gave a great review of The Little Mermaid, which I still have not been able to see, despite now being a proud Regal Unlimited card holder. I haven't been able to go see that one. There are some movies that at the end of today's stream we'll chit chat about. I actually didn't make a slide for it, but the slideshow is back today. It's been a long time, but we're back and we're better than ever, and I'm very excited. And Pedro, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it so much. Let's get into today's top story, our very first story of the day, which should come as no surprise to anyone, but it is about the Superman casting. This was the biggest news of last week, and quite honestly, of the last month, amongst all the Barbie press and Oppenheimer memes and all the excitement about kind of just that, like what's later in the summer. There hasn't been a ton of discussion of like new things, especially with the writer's strike still ongoing. We haven't gotten a lot of new announcements like this is in development or this got cast or whatever. So for Superman to be cast, that's some pretty big news. And as I was doing a little bit of research for today's episode, I did kind of realize that like the news on the announcement of our new Clark Kent and our Lois Lane for James Gunn's upcoming Superman Legacy film, I did realize that the timing feels a little strategic with The Flash recently coming out and being, how should we say, a little bit of a box office flop, a little bit of not delivering on promises that of being the greatest superhero movie of all time, which I'll give my opinion on the film later in this episode. So don't feel like you're being left out of something. But let's meet our new Clark Kent, our new Superman. The minute I saw this man's face, I was like, I know this man from somewhere. I'm very excited because, of course, we have the little signature Superman curl. Like, just, again, that's such a styling thing, but there's something about him and just the look. And I think Superman specifically is a character that his likeness, not that he needs to look exactly like Superman, but I feel like you kind of have to have a vibe. Like, I don't know how to explain this well, but like Tyler Hoechlin, who played him on Superman and Lois, the TV show, to me, never looked like Superman. Like, there's just I don't know, it's just like you see it or you don't type of thing. And I feel like our new Superman, whose name is David Corenswet, I know this man. I've seen multiple TV shows that he's in, but I don't know how to pronounce his name. And I keep calling him Dan in my head. I don't know why. His name is David. So David here might look familiar to you if you're a fan of some of Netflix originals, or more specifically, Ryan Murphy Netflix originals. So David, in the two shows that I immediately recognized and knew him from, are Hollywood. He was like the main character in Ryan Murphy's Hollywood, which is a reimagining limited series of what Hollywood would have been like had it been a little bit more inclusive, diverse, and less taboo around just random things. He plays a up-and-comer who works at this gas station. And the gas station, let's just say, provides a service that normal gas stations do not. As this is a little bit of a professional show, in my opinion, I'm not going to go into that. You can read about the show. But he ends up having very intimate relationships with powerful women in Hollywood and kind of working his way into potentially becoming an actor. It's a very interesting show. It also stars Darren Criss and a couple other familiar faces in like the Ryan Murphy verse. What is his name? I can't think of it, but the lovely actor that plays Sheldon Cooper is also in the show. Very, very interesting show. I was a big fan of it. If you don't like Ryan Murphy's stuff, then you may not be a fan of it. But that was one. And then the other was The Politician, which was a Netflix, I believe there were 2 seasons. I never watched the second season, but in the first season, it follows Ben Platt's character, who is like viciously trying to become student body president, but he's like taking it really seriously. And he ultimately wants to become like the real president of the United States. But he was in love with someone who has passed away named River. And David here played River. So he's like in the series sort of in flashbacks or as like an image of a person, but not that big. He's also in Look Both Ways, the Lily Reinhart kind of like multiverse, like what would have happened, what if type movie. Thank you, Fernando. Jim Parsons. I can't believe I forgot his name. I love him dearly. And then he was also most recently in Pearl. So David has been kind of an up-and-coming star, I would say, and it's very exciting to see him in this. There have been a lot of articles that have come out, or like snippets. I don't know how recent the interviews are, and I can't necessarily quote any of them here. The Hollywood Reporter piece that I believe broke the news on both David and our new Lois Lane's casting, which we'll get to in a second, is linked down below in the description box. So if you'd like to go read the article for yourself, by all means. But David was quoted as basically saying that like he's always wanted to play Superman. Like this is a dream role. I mean, to be cast as Superman is like, that's pretty big. Like I feel like in a superhero type role, like, or as an American, that's kind of the biggest thing that you can get. Biggest like American version of that role. The British version I feel like would be like James Bond. Maybe that's silly to say, but I think since like Jack Ryan isn't necessarily the same level of prestige as James Bond, I feel like Superman is kind of that vibe. And I'm very excited to see him in the role. There were so many people that were being like speculated, or people that they wanted to cast in these 2 main roles, but especially Superman. And I'm really excited to see David's take. I'm also excited because although I was a big fan of Henry Cavill, I mean, there's no denying that Henry Cavill looks both in face, physique, and like temperament and personality, I guess, and like his interest. He was a perfect Superman. And I think this casting feels like a James Gunn understanding what it was about Henry Cavill that people liked, but casting for a younger role that could be built upon in the future and be included in multiple things, as well as I think the beauty, kind of as Brian is saying here, of having someone that's not like the biggest name ever. Like, I think it'd be very off-putting if someone who is such a known role was cast in something as iconic as Superman. Like, you need somebody that you can kind of associate that identity with the actor. I apologize, there's an ambulance or fire truck going by, so you're just gonna have to bear with me if you can hear it. But as Brian says, I love that they didn't cast some high-profile name as the new Superman. Feels refreshing, a lot like MCU films cast these big names as their characters. David as Superman is a win. Totally agree, because like things like seeing Chris Evans and thinking Captain America, there wasn't really like a standard for that beforehand. It's just that that's kind of like what we envision now, or people need to be like Robert Downey Jr.-esque to ever be like an Iron Man type figure. So again, those things were like arbitrary in the past, but like now, or what am I trying to say? Those things at the time of casting did not matter, but they've kind of come to define the role. And I think it's very exciting to see a newcomer in this role. Let's see, what else do we have here on David? Mostly just the news that came out and a couple of reactions from him, and James Gunn just commenting on how excited he is for the future of the DCEU. And I will say, with the casting choices they're making thus far, I'm pretty excited too. For being, you know, as much of a Marvel stan as I am, I'm excited to see this play out. I want a refreshed, new, young, vibrant DCEU. Not young in terms of like the actors all need to be young. I want to be able to see it grow. And I think to have that, you have to be casting younger actors to have that longevity. So then next, of course, we have our Lois Lane. And this was something that like was never on my radar, but makes perfect sense. Now, if you don't recognize this picture on the left of the screen, this is Rachel Brosnahan, best known for her role in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I can't speak. Best known for her role as, what is her name? Millie Maisel? I can't remember. I'm like halfway through the first season. I never got very far on the show. But Rachel Brosnahan, best known for her work on The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I can't speak, too much alliteration. This was something that there are several photos of her that I just look the part. I feel like there is something, again, this is not like news, this is not journalism, this is not even like a scientific or factual based like assumption. It's just something I'm thinking. Rachel Brosnahan bridges the gap between the way that I feel like Lois Lane is portrayed in comics as this like raven-haired, hard-cutting journalist, but also that has to have like be up to snuff to deal with Clark Kent or Superman, while also capitalizing on what people liked about Amy Adams in the role. Does that make sense? Like, I just feel like she's in that middle ground of those two things. So Rachel Brosnahan, of course, like I said, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, but she's been in several other things, and with Marvelous Mrs. Maisel ending, I feel like it feels perfect to see her in a role like this. And if we're going to have somebody that's I don't want to say a newcomer, but someone who is new to viewers as Superman, then I think having someone who is more of a household name for Lois makes a lot more sense. Rachel Brosnahan was also in, for those keeping track, House of Cards for a little while. She was in the movie The Courier with, oh my gosh, Benedict Cumberbatch. And she was also a part of The Blacklist and Beautiful Creatures, which I remember that movie coming out and being like such a little like cult classic amongst girls my age. So very exciting to see her. I feel like she's, of course, now best known for her work in television. And I think coming into a transmedia enterprise or transmedia like narrative, like what I assume the DCEU will be, which is having it exist in both shorts and movies and TV shows, and like having the story of Lois Lane and Superman continue across multiple different media entities, creations, that's very, very exciting, and I think she's going to be perfect for the role. I feel like having, again, like I said, a relatively new face to people alongside kind of a seasoned veteran, and a lot of people joke about how like the MCU is like, is it a movie franchise or is it a television show? Because like if you define television, it's a story being told over multiple years in multiple different like iterations, chapters, I guess you would say. And that's kind of what the MCU is. So I am extremely excited about this casting. I haven't heard any like response from Rachel Brosnahan about this. But again, to me, just makes sense. It just seems to fit. So let's get your thoughts on the matter of our casting of our new Superman and our new Lois Lane. Scroll back up to the top. Hello to everyone who has joined since I've started. Welcome to the stream. I'm so excited that you're here for episode 10 of Above the Line, which I'm excited that we're at this point, but consistency is the goal going forward, guys. So we're going to get to that. Pedro says, I wish James Gunn would have announced this as SDCC with San Diego Comic-Con. Now, this was also something that I think this is a little bit of an older story, so I'm not going to touch on it much today, but most of the major studios are not attending San Diego Comic-Con this year, which is like a large departure from things that have happened in years past. But I feel like with the onset of streaming kind of taking over in the course of the pandemic, Comic-Cons of the past couple years being canceled or very limited, I feel like these companies have gotten used to using things like Investors Days or Tadum, things like that, to really, really lean into like doing their own thing and like announcing things on their own pace. And while I would agree that this would have been a really awesome like panel to get reactions from of this guy coming out and basically, you know, coming out kind of the way that Andrew Garfield did when he was announced as Spider-Man and, you know, being presented to a crowd. But I think that this, to me, shows me a little bit about what James Gunn understands about the DCEU. He understands the need for good PR. He really does. He understands that his most recent film, or the most recent film of the studio, which has had controversies to say the least, paired with an underwhelming box office performance, he needs some good PR. He needs some good faith going forward. He needs people to get excited. And what better to get them excited about than Superman, especially with Batman being a large kind of like addition or like attached string to the Flash. Pivot. It's very smart. I think this is key. So, and also this is pointing towards we're now in the new phase of DCEU, which I think will end up helping things like Blue Beetle when that comes out later this year. So I think that's number one. Number two, I think, is that, did I have a number two? I don't know if I did. So his need for good PR, but also his kind of control of understanding that the fan base of the DCEU, and I'm not trying to say that one fan base is worse than the others, but the fans of the DC universe, especially the Snyder fans, like people who are were really active in the release the Snyder Cut and kind of thing for Justice League, that kind of online campaign and that like camp of fans, I'm not trying to generalize, I'm just saying like these people, I feel like they have, in the space of pop culture, they have garnered way too much power. And I think what James Gunn is doing here is saying, I'm not going to allow a public opinion of like, for example, I don't think this would have happened because the general response to this casting seems to be very positive, would be to reel out this like new guy and have people who want it to be Henry Cavill and want Zack Snyder to come back and make another Superman movie to like riot or be angry, like not literally riot, but wave and shake their fists and just be angry. I feel like doing this and announcing the casting as a pair and setting a really strong foot forward, I think says like, I'm not changing this. This has been done. We're not asking for your opinion anymore. Respond how you like, but I'm moving forward. I think that's a good power move on his behalf going into the rest of, or the future of his controlled DCEU, I guess. Is it still going to be called the DCEU? If somebody wants to weigh in on that, I know that's not necessarily clear. And I feel like James Gunn clarified a lot of what things are going to be called in that like little Instagram video he did about 6 to 10 months ago. And I feel like if I rewatched that, it would be helpful. And yes, I totally agree. He has this all-American look. There's something about him. He feels, I don't mean this to be rude, but I feel like Superman needs to look partially like an everyman, but also like a superhero, like the baddest and best superhero. And I feel like there's a fine line there that I think David is going to capture effortlessly. I'm very excited to see his performance. Actually, that's the one thing that we can't do, but in everything he's been in before, I've been very compelled by him as an actor, so I'm excited to see this going forward. Jeremiah says, I honestly loved the show Hollywood. I understand why it's controversial and it's not for everyone, but it's bold, steamy, emotional, staunchly pro-gay, and charming. It's a very charming show. Like, I think the show, there's something that Ryan Murphy there's a magic that he adds to a lot of shows that he works on. And while I'm not a fan of like his horror work, and I don't really go down that path, when he takes something like pop culture-y, I think he just really, he gets it and he does it well. And this was something that, like, I don't know, I think more people would enjoy the series if they kind of actually knew about it. Jeremiah said, I do like James Gunn's work, of course, and I appreciate that he says his favorite superhero film is Into the Spider-Verse. Taking over DC gives me hope. I think that's the general opinion, and I would totally agree. Pedro also said, Rachel is perfect for Lois Lane. Fernando loves Rachel. Marvelous Mrs. Lane. Totally agree. And then Brian says, Rachel is a fantastic choice for Lois. Saw her on stage a few months ago. She looks the part, like you said. She has the spunk and charm that's pitch perfect for Lois. I totally agree. Like, I think the temperament and the personalities of these actors really bleeds into their performances. And I think Rachel Brosnahan has this ability, as captured so well by Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, this ability to be sarcastic and funny and have a little bit more of a dry sense of humor. And just say things like it is without being off-putting. And I think that's really going to be essential for this role, because I feel like the dynamic between the two of them is, I don't know. I think it's going to work so well. Thank you, Fernando. Her name is Miriam Maisel. Yes, thank you for that. I feel like they call her Midge. That's her nickname. They call her Midge. I need to go back and watch it now to get more Rachel Brosnahan in my life. But, Jeremiah has also never seen Mrs. Maisel. I know, I really want to. It's a very good show. I think the problem is it's not a half-hour show. I feel like if it was half hour, I'd be able to digest it easier, which is such a bad thing to say, because there's some shows I could just binge through even if they're an hour, and there's others that I really just need them to be 30 minutes. It's just going to be called the DCEU now. I guess that makes sense. And then the extended universe will be stuff like Batman and Joker. That makes sense. Ryan says, I can't bring myself to be excited about this knowing how much Henry Cavill was done dirty. While I can see, I feel like Henry Cavill had a very unfortunate situation occur to him. He is somebody who clearly cares a lot about the way that things are approached, the story, probably more so than many actors. And let's be honest, directors or people who are coming in and taking over and trying to seek control or be in charge of a media enterprise like DC may not appreciate actors who try to give opinions like this. Now, I would use it, if it was me, I would use it as a production plus, like, be like, he's a producer, we're gonna do this, we're gonna agree on how we're gonna do this, and find directors that really work well with him. But I think the problem is, to some extent, Henry Cavill represents this relic of old DC that I think James Gunn seems pretty eager to get rid of. And additionally, I think Henry Cavill, I would have understood him as being like his role in the DCEU or DCU being over, if not for The Rock bringing him back. And I feel like that's, again, something that was more like The Rock being given more power. I feel for Henry Cavill because I think he seems to be very passionate about the things, the roles that he takes, The Witcher and Superman being the primary two. But I feel like ultimately studios have to do what they have to do to pursue their longevity, and DC needed a change. And unfortunately, sometimes it's easier to make that change more sweeping if you kind of clear out everything that you had before. I think this is true. Cavill is always going to be, there's something about Henry Cavill that is so distinctly Superman, and he's always going to be that. I think I've taken the philosophy in recent years of, just because it's different now, or there's a new iteration of it, and I keep telling myself this about the new Daredevil show that Disney is going to be making, it doesn't, like, you're always going to have the old thing. You're always going to have everything else with Henry Cavill in it. And I know there's disappointment amongst fans that there won't be any more Henry Cavill going forward. However, I think it's exciting to see that a new character is going. Ultimately, Henry Cavill, even if everything was going great at DC, would have been replaced because he would have gotten too old. period, end of sentence. And we're just in a different phase of the DCEU now. And I, for one, really want the DC films to end up being good, and I want them to become successful films, to become a valid, or not valid, that's the wrong word, become a worthy competitor to Marvel films in terms of box office numbers and just fan excitement and investment, because that will ultimately make the Marvel movies better. They'll make them stronger, because right now it does feel like there's a little bit of a monopoly in terms of this really large and thought out, like the amount of content that Marvel is putting out compared to something like DC is just astronomically larger. And that's not really DC's fault, but it's something that I think will be mitigated by DC kind of correcting some of these things, getting actors that cost less so that David here as Superman can appear in more than just a superhero movie. He can appear in other things because his contract is not as maybe steep as Cavill's was. And I think that's just how it is. Are we ready to move on to our next story of the day? This one is one that I don't necessarily have the absolute most expertise in, but I'm excited to talk about it. And that is that this week it was announced that the Community movie that was announced last September, I believe, that Donald Glover will be will be coming back for kind of the reunion movie kind of thing. Joel McHale, who plays Jeff in the show, which I am in the middle of the first season. I have been working through the show. It's actually going to be in a video, so stay tuned for that. It'll probably be a couple weeks before it's out, but I am working on it. Joel McHale announced this week that Donald is coming back, and he said, quote, Donald's coming back, and that's really important. The fact that Donald's going to do it, that was the big piece. But I think everyone's coming back. I mean, so far, we're pretty good. And I think that will happen. If not, then, Donald will be there. So a little bit vague, and I believe this was in an interview with Kelly Ripa. Now, I don't know. This came out a couple days ago, June 28th, so Wednesday. And I don't know if Donald Glover has since commented on this. But there's definitely not been like a denial of this happening. So let me look at some other stories. Let's see if we actually have a quote. But Joel McHale seems to be kind of like the spearhead for this, as well as Dan Harmon, who is the creator of Community, as well as the creator of Rick and Morty. So pretty prevalent, I would say. They basically are working on this movie. Peacock announced it last September, but the streaming service itself hasn't confirmed his involvement. So I don't know if this is something to publicly put Donald Glover on kind of blast and be like, can you make a public comment and commit to doing this? Or if this is something that is like they're just... Or if he has said something and he's just not making a public comment about it. I don't know. The article is honestly kind of a thin, again, article is linked down below. It's the Entertainment Weekly article. It's pretty thin. The only other interesting part of this, which I think that Donald Glover, Troy, is such a lovable character in the show, and he is such a talent and widely beloved in pop culture and in the public zeitgeist, that it'd be a shame if he wasn't back. I will say, though, that I don't want to spoil the Community for anyone who hasn't watched it like me, because this kind of ended up spoiling it for me a little bit. But for those talking about Chevy Chase coming back, my understanding is that Joel McHale says, yeah, I don't think so. Quote, there weren't any issues at all when we were making the show. He added a healthy dose of sarcasm, but doesn't think that he's going to be back. Now, I don't know, kind of like Nick just said, who is running this movie's PR? I don't know. It sounds like it's Joel McHale. I don't know if this man has money involved. I don't know if he's a producer. But Chevy Chase left the show in the 4th season under a mutual agreement with him and Dan Harmon and some of the other actors involved with the show. And it sounds like there was a pretty definitive storyline that kind of removed him from the show, and he was even replaced by Pedro Pascal at one point. Not replaced, but a storyline involving him that was in the 2020 Zoom table read of Community, of a recreated scene from the show. Walton Goggins, who was in this scene in the original show, was replaced by Pedro Pascal. And then Joel McHale additionally went on to talk about how he hopes both of them will be in the movie. But since Pedro Pascal is so popular, he doesn't think he'll be able to be back. So I included this story simply because I think it's exciting that at the idea of not only this movie coming to fruition, because I know this has been a long, drawn-out fan campaign to continue the show. There's like a big cult following, I feel like, for this TV show. And it's a great show. Like, I'll be honest, like, it's very fun. I've had it on the background for the last couple of weeks, just kind of watching episodes as I can. Very entertaining, very good. And if you're a fan of movies and pop culture, I feel like there's a lot of really good references in the show, or references you could make to the show if you get to know it well enough. But it seems like nothing is 100% confirmed by each individual first hand source. So we're just going to have to see when the movie ends up coming out or when production starts. I think I read something in another piece that it's speculated that filming will start next summer. I believe, well, maybe that was when the piece came out. So either this summer or next summer, but it sounds like we may be far out from this. But thoughts? Anyone have thoughts on this? Again, this was a little bit looser of a story than, of course, the last one, which is so confirmed and such a big story. But it's what we've got for today. So thoughts. Nick has arrived. Nick, thank you for being here. No one has any thoughts about this. That's okay. It's a thin story right now, with Donald Glover, I don't think, commenting on it himself. It doesn't seem like he said anything. Again, the confirmation seems to be pointing towards, Joel McHale's comments. So I don't know. Joel McHale seems to wield a lot of power, and that's all we have to go off of. So since we have no other comment on that, other than we think everyone other than Chevy Chase is returning, that's where the Community movie stands. On to our last story of the day, just because I wanted to make this a little bit more of a quicker episode just to get back into things. We have a personal interest story is what we'll call this one. So there is a wildly popular author that you may have seen if you've wandered into any Target book section or Barnes & Noble or Books A Million, or quite honestly, Costco, Sam's, BJ's, any really store that sells books. I'm sure you have seen a Colleen Hoover book. Her arguably most popular book is a book called It Ends With Us. And it was announced last year that It Ends With Us was being adapted into a movie. Justin Baldoni of Jane the Virgin fame was going to direct it. He also directed 5 Feet Apart, which was a quite good book to movie adaptation as well. So I was very excited when I saw these videos of them doing a script read with Colleen, the author herself. The book, because I'll just lay it out here now, the book covers some kind of darker topics regarding domestic violence and abuse, and so not necessarily just recommending the book up front. And I'm not recommending the movie necessarily, but this book, which is so beloved, has, of course, like anything else that is popular online that has not already been adapted, has gotten a lot of fan casting. Well, when the official casting for the series was made a couple months ago, it was announced that the main character, Lily Bloom, who owns a flower shop, Colleen, we need to talk, but that's fine. Doesn't matter. The main character, Lily Bloom, was going to be played by Blake Lively. Now, not stating that I love Blake Lively. She's beautiful. She's amazing. I think everybody pretty much loves her, and Ryan Reynolds is absolutely obsessed with them. But Blake Lively is an older character than what is portrayed in the book. So Lily in the book is in her 20s. Honestly, I think they describe her as being in her young, early 20s, like probably about my age, like 23, 24. I don't think she's really supposed to be any older than that. And the story kind of details how there's this guy from her past, August, who is here, who was like kind of like her first love, and then some things got in the way. And anyways, she finds herself in a different relationship, and then things don't go so great in her life. And August, her first love, comes back into her life, and it's kind of figuring that out and where the story goes from there. So I will say that the book and a lot of Colleen Hoover's books are wildly popular for a reason. They're easy to read. They have interesting stories. They dissect trauma in a way that I think is not necessarily like clinical or psychological in a good way, but they dive into a little bit of the deeper, more like negative sides of life rather than just sticking with like everything's so perfect in My Little Romance book. And what I think has got people disappointed is when Blake Lively was announced to be cast, the age difference was kind of shocking, but then the photos of them filming started. And Lily is described in the book to have this kind of like quirky style, like fashion sense, but almost all of the photos of Blake Lively have looked horrible. And it's not just about her looks, but it's like weird outfits, weird things. The age gap really does impact the story in a sense, because it's one thing for younger people to be making unhealthy or bad decisions. It's another thing for people closer to their 40s to be making these decisions. And so people were just like upset. And also Justin Baldoni, the director, is going to star as one of the other love interests, Ryle, which just kind of felt weird to me that like he's going to direct and star and not in like a John Krasinski type way of Quiet Place. Anyways, the point is, filming recently paused after a ton of backlash online. Although the pause is not due to backlash, is what Colleen has come out and said. I would argue that it's probably having something to do with the writer's strike or potential impending SAG-AFTRA strike. I think, or director's strike. I can't remember which guild is potentially striking. But I think it has a little bit more to do with that. However, immediately when this pause comes out, people are like, oh, they heard us, they're listening to us, they're going to change things. And Colleen has kind of come out to be like, no, that's not happening. So this story, again, it's a personal interest story because I've read the book. I'm invested in seeing how all of these wildly, insanely popular book talk books, some of which I like, some of which I don't like as much, how these are going to become movies, how they're adapted and received, because there's a long history of people not liking book to movie adaptations. So let me just read you part of this Hollywood Reporter article, which, as with the others, is linked down below. So sorry, this was a lot of background. Nick, thank you for the compliment. I apologize that that's a lot, but I feel like this is something that a lot of people in kind of my other sphere of like the superheroes and the Marvel stuff and the blockbuster movies may not have heard about this, but it's very fascinating movie news because it's happening in real time. And I think the last time we've had something that had this negative of a backlash while it was still being made was Sonic. And that was fixed. It didn't necessarily help the movie that it was fixed, but it was fixed nonetheless. And I'm interested to see what comes of this. So let me just read you part of this article. So Hollywood Reporter, one thing fans seem unhappy with is Lively and Baldoni's casting as leads Lily and Ryle, respectively, because in the book, Lily is 23, while Lively is 35. Ryle is 30, while Baldoni is 39. Hoover explained, so the author, Colleen, explained that she wanted to age the characters up in a movie in an effort to correct a mistake she made in the book. Back when I wrote It Ends With Us, the new adult genre was very popular. We were writing college-age characters. That's what I was contracted to do. I made Lily very young. I didn't know that neurosurgeons went to school for 50 years. So her love interest, Ryle, is a neurosurgeon, which, again, this is something that I just think in the book community, had the change been he's young and he's a doctor, like the book spans a good period of time, a couple years, and so it would make sense if like you stretch the truth a little bit. I don't think anyone was like, this feels like a cop-out, is basically what I'm saying. This feels like an author being like, oh, no, you're not allowed to be mad at me because I made him a neurosurgeon, and neurosurgeons have to be older. Instead of just being like, he's just going to be in the medical field, nondescript, and he's going to be younger. You know what I'm saying? Like, this just feels like people are mad about the casting because, once again, with the topics that this book covers and the story that is supposed to be, like, thematically covering this book of, like, not repeating generational mistakes and kind of stopping cycles of abuse and trauma, it feels like a lot different of a story for these characters to be older. I'm not saying that this kind of stuff does not happen to older people or that older people can't make the same mistake, but it makes a lot more sense thematically if we're dealing with younger characters. And also, Colleen, I think it's a little unfair for you to come back and be kind of biting back at your fans and being like, you shouldn't be mad at me because you're unhappy because I've changed something big. It feels like most of her fans are going to be like young aged. And so it's confusing to me that you're not appealing to that. Like, everybody loves Blake Lively, yes. But people don't love Blake Lively playing 23 or a character that's supposed to be 23 and dealing with 23-year-old problems. Like, part of this book entails starting of businesses, like following dreams, like coming out of the military. And it's very confusing to basically act like these characters who are supposed to have this reunion or like have a new start on life happen. It almost just feels like contextually, I don't understand how you're going to fill in like 10 years. I'm kind of rambling here, but Hoover continues, there's not a 20-something neurosurgeon. As I started making this movie, I'm like, we need to age them out because I messed up. So that's my fault. So again, this hyperfixation on one character being a neurosurgeon, when the entire role of him being a neurosurgeon in the book, let me tell you something. Miss Colleen, clearly, I'm being rude. I'm sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent here. I've read several of Colleen Hoover's books, and I like them, and they are quick. They're like good, like a good fast food. Like, when I want it, I'm gonna eat it. I'm gonna consume it really fast. I'm gonna feel happy that I did it afterwards, but like I can't do too much of it. In her books, professions are used more either for the amount of money they're supposed to make or kind of the most notable thing. Like, there's another book of hers called Ugly Love, which similarly deals with like dark topics, but it's a romance book. The character is a pilot, and that really only serves for him to be on the go. Like, he could be a traveling salesman. That just doesn't seem as interesting, and like, she wanted him to wear a uniform. So here, I'm not understanding, babe, why when we say that she made a mistake, the mistake is not, well, that's really not essential to the book. It feels like she doesn't understand what her audience wants, and I feel like that's what I'm most confused about, because to make a more broader, more important point, rather than me just kind of ranting about this and giving you a little bit of background on a social media thing. One moment. There's sometimes you just talk and then my voice gets like, my throat gets really dry. Anyways, if we are going to continue, and I know when I say these book talk books are being adapted, like, they are being purchased up in droves to become like there are authors who their entire, like, not filmography, their entirely, all their books, all their backlog has been optioned for movies, or the rights, or it's in production. Like, all of my favorite author, Taylor Jenkins Reid's books, are being adapted currently. Like, they're all being in the works. Emily Henry, who is a very popular romance writer, all of her books. I wouldn't be surprised if more of Colleen Hoover's books are being adapted. But what I feel like we're missing is, if we're purchasing the rights to something because it has a pre-existing audience, a smart thing to assume is when you adapt the book that has a pre-existing audience that you can study and demographically look at, okay? And the things that they talk about are, like, that's the other thing, is fans put everything they want in an adaptation online these days. And that's why I think stuff like Daisy Jones and the Six really well received, because a lot of the producers and cast on that did a lot of work into what was important to fans and what wasn't, and then they made their creative liberty changes around that. But for something like this, if you know that most of the fans of this book are in their 20s, and the characters in the book are in their 20s, I feel like the obvious conclusion is to cast people in their 20s, or people playing 20 in the movie, not to make crazy changes like this. Also, and this is, again, this is all coming across as like this, like, really shallow, like, not narcissistic, but just like, visually focused. But like, this man right here in the book is supposed to be like, this man had book talk in a chokehold. Like, they are obsessed with August, okay? Love him, would like burn all the rest of their books if they could make this man real. And when you have that kind of dedication to a character, I feel like you need to cast somebody that the fans are then telling you what they want. Because again, we could find the actor that they want to cast and cast them. So I go back and forth on this because I don't think fans should have more power than the people actually making a movie. Like, I don't think that's wise. I don't think that's smart. However, it continues to prove that when you are basing a new entity, a new film or new show off of intellectual property, when you correctly handle fan service and you give fans a casting that they like or a reference that they like or something, it pays off for you. I've never seen it not pay off. I've never seen a fan be like, I actually didn't like that they did this for us. Too much of it, sure, that can get out there. But my point with this is not that anyone that making these decisions is listening to me, but let's not continue to make people mad when they're the audience you're trying to appeal to for something like this. Because let me tell you something, the plot of it is not so revolutionary and interesting that it's just gonna like snatch people off their feet. And off the bat, with who you've casted, you're not bringing in like men, like pretty much at all, unless their girlfriends and wives are dragging them along, okay? Just being honest. So this is where we're at. If anyone has thoughts on this, I would love, this is actually something I should really do a video about. I'm sorry for this rant. However, this is something that has just consumed so much of my social media timeline since all of this was announced last year. And it's fascinating that we're just at like a stopping point with this, because I don't know where it's going to go. I don't want it to go like a Batgirl route, but I'm also not really a fan of like making something crappy when you could have made something good. That's all I'm saying. Blah, blah, blah. I'm trying to see if there's anything else in this outfit. Colleen said, I don't remember describing outfits at all in the book because that's been a huge critique that people have never seen Blake Lively look this bad. And now I don't know what scenes they're filming. I don't know what creative license they're taking. And like I said, this book does cover heavy topics. I don't think we should glamorize that. But then I feel like I don't know, like this just looks like somebody like grabbed Blake Lively out of bed and like was like, be in this movie. I don't know. Hold on. Let me respond to some of your comments. Nick has said, every line of news from this movie is always, yeah, I think this person will come back. I don't know, but I'm confident. Yeah. Oh, for Community. Yep. But if no one comes back, I'll be there. Yes. So I totally agree. Like, it's like, if they're making it, people are going to watch it. Hopefully this new stuff comes and happens, but whatever. I've never seen Natasha this frustrated. We talk about a lot of frustrating things. We really do. I think it just comes down to the fact that I'm not understanding how there is such a large community simply on TikTok, but like Instagram, the entire social media gambit, forums, like people love these books. Like you can literally count potentially the number of tickets that you could get for a movie like this based on the number of sales of this book. And yet you're going to do things that directly contradict the book. That just doesn't make logical sense to me. But maybe I'm not seeing this in a way that I need to. And so if anybody has a counterpoint, by all means. I just think it fundamentally changes the book. And not just because, again, these characters are characters that are trying to figure out their lives. They've had bad things happen in their past and they're trying to move on from that. It's the whole point of the book. And if you're telling me that for like 10 years, they've just like done kind of nothing about, I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. Jeremiah says, I haven't read them, but after watching a Clockwork Reader's video on Colleen Hoover's books, I just can't see myself reading them. I'll be honest. Like, I don't mean to go after Miss Colleen here, but like Colleen Hoover books, they have been criticized for a lot of like trauma dumping and discussions of psychologically intense topics that are not necessarily being handled in the healthiest way, because it's a book. It's a book being written not by a clinical psychologist, not by somebody who can diagnose people, not by somebody who actually knows like the best ways to deal with it. So she's caught a lot of flack, and I get a little frustrated by that because 99% of people who read books will read books about characters or about things that they don't necessarily like agree with. For example, in a television space, how many people loved Breaking Bad, but people are not just out on the street cooking meth? They're just not. Like, that's just not what happens. So in a book, I don't know why a book should be taken any differently. And there's all this argument about, well, if it appeals to young women, and like young women understand what's real and what's not, just the same way as any other demographic in space. I'm really ranting today, and I really want to apologize to everybody for it because I'm really just unhinged, quite honestly, today. The books, I think the reason that they are popular as they are is there is more depth to them than what a lot of romance books offers. I think if you're looking for something that kind of validates like a real world experience of things being tough or difficult or bad things happening and you still being deserving of love and exciting, positive, better things being in your future, I think Colleen Hoover's books do that the best. There's something in her books, I don't know if it's like the chapter length that she has scientifically come to or the way in which she writes, but you can zoom through these puppies like nobody's business. Like, you can just read them. Another reason they've been wildly popular is they were massively available on Kindle Unlimited and other free ways to read books. And still to this day, despite the fact that like this book has had a sequel come out last year, had new exclusive editions, like there's still books of hers that are available. Like, she could totally just like revoke everything and put it behind a paywall, but she hasn't. And I think that's why Colleen Hoover continues to be popular. And I think just they're easy to read. Like, they're very enjoyable. The story is there. It's very gripping, a lot of her stories. And so that's why they're as popular as they are. I'm not trying to like demean them, and I don't think that anyone should be like, well, it's not quality, so I'm not going to read it. I don't think they're for everyone though, and I wouldn't recommend them across the board. But yeah, I think that's the problem is like, since her books do catch some flack and since her books are not for everybody, I feel like you have to make a movie for the people her books are for, and they're not hitting that. Anyways, I feel like even her fans must understand why some people feel some of them are problematic, not steamy, which is fine, problematic. I'm glad you like them though, and rants are always welcome. Thank you. I like the books of hers that I've read, other than like one or two of them, but it's also like I've just realized her books aren't necessarily all for me. And I think this is another like random thing is like, if you're watching or reading or consuming content that you like know you're not gonna like why are you doing that to yourself, other than unless it's for like an academic purpose, I guess. Anyways, so Nick, they look like Wanda and Bucky pretending to be Steve taking a walk in New York. They really do. Like, that's the thing is like, I don't know when in the story this takes place, and there's times when like her looking like this could be very fitting, and it's really not just the way she looks, it's like the fact that, again, they're taking things from the book about her being kind of disheveled and having this like quirky style and always being late and always in a rush to stuff. They're taking that, and again, all of these things fit like a 20-something trying to figure out their life, but it makes it kind of a sadder story if this is like a closer to 40-year-old that's doing this stuff. Again, not trying to shame anybody. I'm just saying it makes it a different story. Yep, exactly, Jeremiah. A book should have something to do with reality if you want. I mean, I like fantasy books. But yeah, this is partially why there's books that I would riot if they're announced to become movies or shows, because I like don't trust people because of things like this. Like this. I'm putting in the wrong direction. Guys, that's kind of our episode. That's what I had planned for us. So if there's anything you'd like to chat about, any quick questions you have, before we wrap this stream up, I'd be more than happy. If you have a story from this week that I didn't touch on that you'd like me to talk about, now's your chance before we sign off for the evening. Let's see. World's Biggest Geek says, hello, hi there. How do you feel about Superman and Lois coming back for a season 4? What are you most exciting? I don't watch Superman and Lois. I have never watched an episode of it. I really like Tyler Hoechlin from his Teen Wolf days, and there's something about him that for some reason, whenever a like like 30 something brunette guy is described in a book, I just always imagine him. Like I don't know. So I'm happy for him. I'm happy for the woman who plays Lois in that series. I don't know her name, but she was also in Grimm, which I liked her in that show. So I'm very happy for them to have a 4th season, but I'm probably not going to watch. And so I unfortunately don't have something that's like I'm most excited about. I also, again, I want to lean into more of a closed DC universe, closed loop with singular actors playing characters. That just, I like that as a fan. And so as long as this continues, it's not going to be the same thing. So I apologize that I don't have anything more exciting to give for that question. But yeah, let's see, would I ever get into cosplay? I feel like maybe. I think it would the problem is people who are into cosplay are like really into it and they really commit to like the poses and the photography, and I just don't know that I could do that. I don't know that I could take myself. This is going to come across wrong, so I need to be careful how I phrase this. I really admire people that take cosplay as seriously as they do, but I don't think that I could take myself that seriously and do it justice in a way that would like add to the cosplay space. Not that it's all about like me doing something new, but I also think that I would not be good at like making my own cosplay. I'm a big Halloween gal, and I like, as much as my last year's Halloween costume, which was Morty, which was just a inside out yellow shirt I owned. Let's not speak of that. I love like that concept, and I like going for costumes that you can kind of DIY but aren't like that intensive. Although I really admire like cosplays that are that way. I think the answer is maybe, Nick. I think it would have to be the right cosplay for the right reason and then go from there. But I don't know that I could ever be in the mind space of like, I'm going to be in full cosplay today and like do some cool photos. Like, I just don't think that would necessarily be my alley. But great question. What about you, Nicholas? How would you ever get into cosplay? Let us know. The people need to know. Guys, I think that may be it for today. That may be it because my throat is getting dry. My coffee is almost done. I've ranted. I've given you the news on Superman and Lois. Not Superman and Lois, the TV show, but the new casting of Superman and Lois Lane. We've talked about the uncertainty of the Community movie and the rage that for some reason I've been penting up about It Ends With Us's movie adaptation. But I want to thank you guys all for being here. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Nick. Thank you for being here. Thank you to everyone who came for even a minute of the stream. This has been such a fun one to get back in. I feel like I was just really excited to talk about today's stories, and I feel like that's what makes a difference with Above the Line. We'll be back next week. I'm going to go ahead and plan the stream now while I'm at it, and then we may be able to figure out a time closer. If anyone has thoughts on what time works best, middle day, evening time, early evening, anything like that, this time kind of worked well for me today. The problem is I don't know if it will for next week, so we'll figure that out. But thank you all again. Have a wonderful evening, and be on the lookout this week for some new videos. I said I was going to talk about movies. We'll save that. I may